It was just a magnificent sight. All different color lights, and they were iridescent.
I looked up to my right out my window and saw a large object floating in the sky with lights.
We
Not a
continued to
sound.
watch, and it didn't move. It was, to me, a beautiful experience. It wasn't a frightening experience. I would love to have it again, and I would love to know more about what's going on out there.
And I spotted a metallic object with windows all around, and it was almost like there was a beacon inside the windows. I could see them clearly. I saw them several times. They were solid on clear nights. You could actually see that it was a solid object with lights all around it. There weren't many lights, but enough to indicate that it was a V-shape.
I think people should be made aware of what's going on.
Maybe it was meant for them to have that little moment in life.
The Hudson Valley is kind of a unique place in this country because it was inhabited by Native Americans, of course, for thousands of years, like other parts of the country. But then we had the Dutch coming in the 1600s, the English, and many other different cultures, all bringing their history, their legends, their lore. So this is a very rich area culturally, for myths and legends, for the paranormal, for all kinds of very intriguing subjects. My name is Linda Zimmermann, and I'm an author here in the Hudson Valley. For about 20 years now, I've been writing about science, history, and some of the more esoteric subjects. For many years, as I was lecturing around the Hudson Valley, people came up to me with their UFO stories, and I always said, sorry, I don't do UFOs. But so many credible people had so many amazing stories to share. I said, you know, maybe I should do UFOs. The moment the newspaper articles started coming out, I was inundated with emails, phone calls, letters. I would say well over 100 people corresponded with me, and I believe I have gotten back to every single person. I have at least phone interviewed, if not personally interviewed, every one of those 100 people. One of the things that surprised me when I started this project was to find out that the Hudson Valley actually ranks number 3 as a UFO hotspot. Between 1982 and 86 alone, there were over 5,000 sightings, and our history really goes back to the 20s up to the present. So we have decades, generations of sightings from Manhattan up to Albany. This truly is a very long-standing hotspot for UFO activity. Every year, Pine Bush holds a UFO festival celebrating our otherworldly friends. And it's really fascinating to see a lot of educated people from around the region discussing their experiences, sharing sightings, and talking about the latest research and trying to do this scientifically. And it's nice to see somebody taking a rational approach to this, because people can get very emotional and discount it. But something's obviously going on, and I, for one, want to know what it is. It's amazing to see how UFOs and aliens have affected our modern culture. It's everywhere. So this is really the first day of my research into the history of UFOs and sightings in the Hudson Valley, and I'm fascinated to see where the adventure will lead me.
Won't be the first time in the back of the Capcom car.
Patrolling every 2 hours. An actual PD, car 54, but we name it 82 because of the street number. 82. And every year we go for the parade, we do the patrol.
I feel safe now.
That's it, now you're safe.
Scare all those UFOs away.
Yes. 1961.
Beautiful.
Yes, it's a nice car. The name was
That's very fun.
flying saucer beams over a cup of coffee while the locals are talking about their sightings. They sit in the diner and says, hey, you see the UFO? And that's exactly what this is all about. And here we have the sightings in Crawford. This is actual sightings that people have seen. And then look at this one. Question mark, they're coming. Like all these people have visited the diner from all over the world.
The Pine Bush UFO Festival. I don't know if there's anything to this alien stuff, although I kind of feel like I'm being watched. That's the end of the parade. Pretty fun. Everybody was into it. And if anybody asks me if there's aliens in Pine Bush, I've seen them.
I'm Roger Phillips. I'm a designer, a product designer, and a cartoonist with Close Encounter Studios. We started off by making the sculptures. The idea was that early on, a lot of the items that were available for people who liked aliens and UFOs were very kind of cheap and tchotchke-ish looking. Little koozies, keychains, and that sort of thing. So we said, let's try to make something a little more realistic, to kind of depict some of the historical events that happened in UFO history. And from that came the cartoons, the Gray Zone cartoons. And of course I did a little research about Pine Bush and what happened over here, and I like the idea that it's becoming more mainstream and people are more interested in the subject. So I said, this is a great thing, let's come over here and meet some folks who are like-minded. And the Hudson Valley is a hotbed for it, and we saw the famous one in the early 80s, that V-shaped one that went over the the electrical power lines near our house, and that kind of started our interest in this whole phenomena. But it's funny because there's always split, those who believe that there's something else out there and those who don't. I think that community is not as welcoming as this one towards that idea. You know, Pine Bush is not really making it a big point. And I think it's still split over there. But there are some, you know, even now when I mention it or I talk about it, they said, yeah, I remember seeing that UFO back in the 80s. So there's a commonality there, so that people do remember that event. It was at night. I remember I was still in high school, and my friend calls me up, he says, you gotta go outside. So my father and I, we run out in the backyard, like you see on TV, and then there's that famous boomerang-shaped, pattern of lights, and they're just silently gliding over these Con Edison high power lines, and just, very silently gliding, and then, just takes off into the sky. So that was our experience with seeing UFOs. I think you hope to see something, and sometimes, oh, what is that silver glint? And it turns out to be an airplane.
Well, my name's Larry Hunt, but everybody calls me Butch. I picked that nickname up. I don't know where or when, but that's it. And I've lived here since, we moved here in '44. And I've had the shop since '83, but I've worked in here since around '65, off and on, till the Beatles come out. Then all the barber shops went under, so I got laid off. Oh, most of them are believers. Yeah, so I hear a lot of tales, a lot of good stories, and everything from hybrids to encounters to abductee victims to, oh gosh, everything and everybody and anything. I got a whole collection of, I believe it, they believe it, and I'm not making it up. I can tell, I've heard enough stories. I've been involved in this since the '60s, so I can spot a phony when they come in. Impressed me most the brilliant luminosity of the circular eye upon my 1.5 million candle power beam. Hit it, it went 50 yards in a blink of an eye across the field. It made screams, female shrieks, disturbed me the most, 8:30 to 9 p.m. They watched it for over a half an hour.
During the festival, we were invited by Bill, who was a member of the festival committee, to come to a UFO support group meeting that they hold every single month just outside of Pine Bush. We're at the United Friends Observer Society meeting here in Walker Valley at the schoolhouse, and this is where a group of people from Pine Bush who had experiences over the year started getting together and making it a ridicule-free zone for people to come and tell their stories, and a lot of people just feel comfortable being here. It's a place to talk to somebody for a change and not keep your story inside.
Welcome. Good to see everybody. We had a few people last month for the July meeting. I don't know what's going on, but we had fun. I have a couple of announcements.
I'm at my second meeting of the UFO group that's in Pine Bush, New York. The meetings are held in Walker Valley. And this was a slightly different group from the first time I was here, some of the usuals, but to see that these people have been coming here, some of them over a decade, and it's like a haven for those who just need somebody to talk to without being ridiculed.
This is the one that I was saying up in 475 River Road in Tilson Extension. And they meet the first Monday of the first Friday, the discussion group concerning all things paranormal and metaphysical.
I'm Jim Marzano. I been living in Kingston since '82. We just tried to establish a safe place where people can come and in a non-judgmental, supportive environment to speak about metaphysical, paranormal experiences in general, not just UFO, ET stuff. But I do think they're all related, and that is the basic thrust of the group is acknowledging the extraterrestrial presence on Earth.
Does your group have a name?
We call it the Star Nation Sacred Circle.
It seems to go hand in hand that if you've had an intense UFO experience and no one has listened to you, you start to follow the whole concept of government conspiracies and all the layers of other things that go along, not just UFOs, but what's in our air, what's in our water, what is our government doing to us. It may be, just because they're paranoid doesn't mean it isn't true, as the saying goes, but there does seem to be this pervasive distrust of all things government because there's a clear UFO problem, experience, and the government isn't paying attention to these people, so they're naturally suspicious of then anything else that the government is telling us or not telling us. I went to see Men in Black 3 last night, 3D, which I really liked, and when I got home, there happened to be a message from somebody who had been at the Pine Bush UFO meeting. He was trying to warn me about something. I don't know what it was because at that point his message became garbled and I couldn't understand it. Another coincidence? I don't know.
Last night, and I have some things I'd like to talk to you about. I know what you're trying to do, but I got to tell you some things that you need to be careful of, and when you do it. Now there's
During 1982 to 1986, about 5,000 reports were made of UFO sightings in the Hudson Valley. A plethora of newspaper articles appeared regarding UFOs, as well as announcements for UFO support groups and hotlines.
No, we don't have cable.
Gloria should explain.
Yes, tell us what the button is.
I saw it.
Mm-hmm. And where'd you get it?
Did. I got it in Brewster, New York in 1984.
Nice.
They had a conference because we must have had a lot of sightings around here. But
what happens if you call the number today?
I don't know. I don't know. I thought maybe you want to call that number. It was someone, it's a Peekskill number, and he was writing little things in the penny saver. And that's where I picked it up, because in those days the penny saver was like a Bible. Not anymore. But that's where I happened to see that there was going to be a conference up there. And I went up.
All right, well, my name then was Gloria LaPala. It's now Gloria Margata.
Okay.
And it was in 1984, and it was in the summer, because it was warm. There were leaves on the trees. And I was standing here ironing and looked up to my right out my window and saw a large object floating in the sky with lights and not a sound. And of course, you are excited. So I ran upstairs, told my parents about it. They went outside, looked, saw the same thing I saw, ran downstairs, looked for a camera, couldn't find my camera because I didn't want to miss what I was looking at. Ran back outside again, looked at it again, and it had only gone no more than 200 feet from the time I first looked at it. And I just stood there and watched it go over my house, over the treetops, and just disappeared.
And so you saw it, your parents saw it,
yes.
And then did you try to report it?
Yes, I called the police department and I asked them what just flew over Putnam Valley, and he said to me, "I'll be damned if we know, lady." And that was the extent of our conversation.
That was it. So they had obviously gotten other calls.
So, yeah, he knew what I was talking about.
How did that make you feel seeing it? Were you frightened at all? Did you
No,
excited?
I wasn't frightened. I was excited. It was, it made your heart beat a lot quicker. It didn't look like it wanted to hurt anyone, you know, and it's certainly because after this happened, I mean, you heard so many stories. Oh, they're V-shaped. They're airplanes that are flying from whatever airport, and they fly in a V form. And what I saw was not a plane, and it was not in a V shape, and it wasn't a plane. It was this.
And it was silent.
And it was silent. It was what I saw was this.
So how has this possibly affected your outlook on life and over the years?
On life? Oh, I don't know about life, but it sure has perked your interest about UFOs, because now I am interested in UFOs. I always liked stuff that was a little bit unusual, but seeing it was quite a shock. Brewster, New York, the UFO conference in 1984. They had a conference because apparently a lot of people saw a lot of things around that period of time.
Were there a lot of people in attendance?
Yes, hundreds were there. And all of them telling, I didn't get up, and I just wrote. They asked you to write your little story about what you saw, which I did, and I gave it to them. But I didn't get up and speak. But there were a lot of people that did.
What it was, I can't really tell you, but I know I seen it. It's something that, even though I was real small and my brother seen it, and quite a few people seen it, probably more in Sauger's area too, that really didn't want to come out and talk about it. My name's Hank Vanderbeck. I've been living in Sauger's all my life, and I'm a retired law enforcement. And this incident I'm about to relate is probably pretty unbelievable, but exactly it happened. Back in 1953, my brother and I, we used to live with my parents in this little white house over here on the bottom of Canoe, what they call Canoe Hill. And the day the incident happened with the UFO, it was probably bright, clear, sunny skies, warm out, 75, 80 degrees. And we were outside playing and with some other kids in the neighborhood. And somebody yelled out that there was some kind of object up in the sky. And we all started looking at it for about 10 or 15 minutes. My mother came out and we all started looking at this object. What it was an object that looked like this, probably about 1,500 feet up in the air.
It was motionless?
It was just stationary, probably 300 to 350 feet long. And the width of it was probably about 50 feet, dark brown in color. And around this object were 4 rings that the best way I can describe it, they look like hula hoops. Now these rings were probably about 100 feet high, and they were green and red. Somebody must have went in the house, they called the town police, and the town police evidently called Stewart Air Base, which is down to our southeast over here. After like 20 minutes in the southeast, 3 jets came, relatively low, and they were loud as heck. And they headed, instead of heading towards the object, which is in the northeast, for some reason they headed from southeast to northwest. They swung around. We looked over at the object. The object very slowly started to rise vertically, and all of a sudden it accelerated to a tremendous speed, and within a couple seconds it was a little brown spot, then it disappeared. Now, my brother seen it. He's a year and a half older than I was at the time. He's retired law enforcement. We have no reason really to make this thing up. I've been telling this story all my life. And there's probably 15 people in this general area seen the object. The next day in the newspaper there was an article that the Stewart Air Base generated a squadron went out to check out the site, the supposed UFO in the Saugerties area, and they checked it out and they just referred to it as it was a weather balloon. And I was just glad that, you know, Linda, you came out with this book, and just to show how much of a hotbed the Hudson River Valley is as far as UFOs.
On March 26, 1983, a UFO article appears on the front page of the Westchester Rockland Daily Item. Directly afterwards, a phone line is set up by a group led by Dr. J. Allen Hynek. They receive over 300 callers reporting strange V-shaped lights on the night of March 24, 1983 alone. Well, welcome everyone. If we could start with you introducing yourselves.
Okay. Hi Linda, I'm Debbie Carbone.
I'm Doris Acosta Craywick.
I'm Jackie Worthington.
And what were your professions?
We're all teachers.
We're all teachers. Mm-hmm.
Great. Now, Debbie, you and I had spoken previously about an incident the three of you had.
Yes.
If you could tell us when that occurred and what the circumstances were.
That was March 24th, 1983. And the three of us were coming home from a graduate course at Fordham University. And we were driving north on the Taconic Parkway. Doris was driving and Jackie and I were passengers. And in the distance I saw this big beam and I thought maybe it was a airplane. But it just seemed different. It just seemed brighter. And I didn't say anything for a long while because I didn't want to, you know, alarm anybody, including myself. And but as it got closer and closer, we all saw it, and we just knew that it was something different. And at one point, we pulled off to the side of the road because all of the cars on the Taconic, northbound and southbound, were pulled off to the side of the road. Everybody was out of their cars looking up at this vehicle that was just above the trees. It was hovering. We didn't hear any sounds, but I remember the back of it was a triangular shape. It was about the size of a football field or 2 football fields. It was huge, and it was dark. I remember it being black, but in the back of it, I remember rotating bright lights, red, white, blue, green. They were just very, very bright. And it seemed like we were there for 20 minutes. I'm not sure if that's, you know, how long, but it felt like it was a long time. And, you know, we were all very interested, I think up to a point, and then I just remember hearing Close Encounters of the Third Kind music in my head, thinking at some point, I just want to go home.
I was driving, I remember driving, and I remember, first of all, everything got very, very bright. And all the cars in front of me were moving over to the right, to the, you know, there was past the shoulder onto a big grassy area, very grassy area. So I pulled over like everyone else, and I was just amazed at how everything was bright, and But I don't remember details like Debbie does. But I do remember that I wanted to stay. I was like overwhelmed by it. I was in awe of it. And Jackie said, let's just go home. Let's just go home. That's what I remember.
Okay. What I remember is somebody, I thought it was Doris that said, do you have apartments in Mayapack? And we said no, and she says, what are those lights? And then we all focused on the lights. And they were coming down the parkway towards us as we were going north. And then we noticed there were cars pulled off everywhere on the side. So the next grassy area, we pulled off. And we waited, and it was shaped like a boomerang. I remember colored lights, but I remember them being round and on the sides. And when you looked up, it was above the tree line. But I don't know if it was 100 feet, but it wasn't high in the sky. It was feet above us. And it just hovered there. And when I had the feeling that it was eerily quiet, there was not a sound. The people weren't making sounds. There wasn't any talking, and that object was quiet. And we stood there for I don't know how long, maybe 20 minutes, and I just thought, I wanted to go home. I had it. I was curious to see where it would go or what would happen, but it was just so eerily quiet that we left. And we watched in the background. We watched out the rear view window or turned around, but eventually the lights disappeared.
1987, Dr. J. Allen Hynek publishes the book Night Siege, The Hudson Valley UFO Sightings, recounting the events of the 1980s. Whitley Strieber publishes Communion, a book on his 1985 abduction from his cabin near Pine Bush by those he names the Visitors. The book becomes #1 on the New York Times bestseller list with over 2 million copies sold, and in 1989 it is made into a movie starring Christopher Walken. In 1991, Ellen Crystal publishes her book Silent Invasion.
My name is Dennis Sant. For a living, I am the Putnam County Clerk. Actually, I was Deputy County Clerk back in March 17th, 1983. My first wife had just recently passed away, and I was intertwined with my children like never before. And we were at a church social, a youth group, and it was about 8:30. I'm driving home, and off to the left, I could see into my backyard, and I saw a city of lights hanging just like this in the backyard. And we stopped the van on a road, and we all came out the window, looking out the window to see what it was. It was just a magnificent sight. All different color lights, and they were iridescent. And I pulled into the driveway, and we all ran out of the van and into the backyard. When we got there was nothing in the backyard. It was all gone. And I'm looking around. There wasn't a light in the sky except the stars. So I took the children into the house and got them ready for bed. While we were preparing for the evening, I just had this urge inside my stomach to walk back out the front door. When I did, I could see this tremendous object just hovering on Interstate 84. And by the time I got out there, all the cars had stopped, the blinkers were blinking. I could see probably 20 to 30 silhouettes of people just looking up at the sky underneath there. When I saw that, it was like I was jealous that I didn't have a better view of the whole thing. And that L-shaped city of lights all of a sudden just kind of shifted and turned into a V, just like that. And then turned and faced me, and it started to drift over back to the house. While I was feeling the jealousy that I wasn't close enough, when it got to the house, all the lights intensified. It was like being at a night football game. I could see everything in the distance. And because it was winter time, it was nighttime at 8:30. So the road was illuminated, and it started to drift around my house, just, I would say, 100 yards above the tree lines. It came to another stop in the middle of my yard over a pond, and it stayed there for a few more minutes. It was so close that if I had a baseball and I was 18 again, I could definitely hit it.
After the Unsolved Mysteries episode with Dennis Sant aired, there was a surge in tourism to the Pine Bush area, bringing night watchers and UFO enthusiasts. In 1997, local officials began to enforce laws to discourage the flocks of tourists who were jamming up traffic, parking overnight on the side of the road, and trespassing along Route 52 and Searsville Road nightly in an attempt to experience the otherworldly. So I left a message for the mystery caller, and I was sitting here reading in bed, and he finally called me back after a couple of days, and wow, I don't know what to say. I felt like I was in an X-Files movie. There's a lot of conspiracy theory to his story. It could be all true. It could all be a delusion. I don't know, but I know his message to me was garbled. He believes his phone is being tapped by the government because of all of his UFO work and UFO photographs. He also claims that he can't get a job because the government has put something questionable in his background file because he's trying to get the truth about UFOs out there. So, what do I believe? I don't know. I'm going to have to interview him and see what happens.
So human beings are fundamentally meaning makers. From the moment we are born, we are working very, very hard to organize the flood of sensory input that we're taking in into meaningful stories of some kind. My name is Elizabeth Fine. I'm a psychologist and an anthropologist with an interest in culture and narrative.
For 45 seconds, I would say, we looked up like, oh my God, what is that? What are they? And you're just in awe of everything.
My name is Audrey Garay, and this event took place in June of 1972. I was 21 years old, and I was coming home from work. That particular night, I had my mother with me and my 5-month-old infant. And she was coming back to my house to spend the night. That's why she was with me, and I was happy she was. I had a witness. And as we came along this secondary road, maybe a half a mile up the road, we saw way up in the sky, among the stars, we noticed a light, several lights. It was an object that we actually thought was a plane at the time, and we both noticed it at the same time. And what caught our attention, I believe, was there were different multicolored lights other than your normal green, red, and white. There were also blue lights. And so we kind of watched it. We came down over this hill, and my mother says to me, Audrey, that plane is coming down. And I looked, and it was descending, and it was descending rapidly. And by the time we got to this spot, we really thought that we were going to witness a jetliner crashing. This is going to be a horrible tragedy. And I can recall I stopped my car right about here, and my instinct was to cover my ears. I didn't want to hear the impact of this plane. It stopped. I took my hands away from my ears. My mother did the same, and we looked, and what we thought was a plane was not a plane. It was a saucer-shaped object, and it was huge.
came in the development, my mom and I were home, coming home from All Sport in Fishkill. We pulled in, it was probably 9:45, maybe 10 o'clock at night. And as we pulled in the development, I had been looking in my purse. I had my head down like this, looking in my purse. And the car stopped and she said, "What's that?" And I looked up and I was in shock. There was two huge truck lights above this tree. And it was directly on top of the tree. It wasn't like, 50 feet above it. It was like right there. And she stopped the car and I didn't take my eyes off of it and I did this. It was a manual roll down window at the time. I rolled down the window and I listened for a noise and there was no noise, complete silence. And she said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Take off." And to take off, to get to our home, she had to go towards it. So as she went towards it, the road veered to the left. And it was at that point, I was underneath it. And I still had my head out the window watching this thing. And I was like this, and it was just dark gray. It was this dark gray, I don't know, metal, I'm assuming metal object, right above our car, right above it. And we had to keep going. We had to keep going to get home. So as we made the turn, the second turn, she pulled in her driveway and this thing came to the tower, above the central Hudson Tower in the back of our house. She jumped out with all her stuff. And I looked at it again and I came in the house and I wanted to go outside. I wanted to go on the back porch to go meet these things. And she grabbed my shoulders like this and she shook me with tears coming down her face, saying, "You don't know what they'll do to you." After she said that, it knocked sense into me. And after probably 10 minutes of us both freaking out in the house, scurrying, not knowing what to do, I got on the phone and I called, I believe it was the state police. There was no 911 back then. It was either the state police or the county police, sheriff's department, but they laughed and they said, "Are you drunk?" And I said, "No, I just came home from All Sport with my mother." And I proceeded to tell them. Well, after that, they hung up and I eventually got the courage to look out the back window and it was gone. It was gone.
It was very, very big. And what we could see inside this disc-shaped craft, there were lights that went all the way around the outer rim. And they were flashing and revolving very quickly. If I truly wanted to see them, that through thought I could. That's how I feel. And I believe I probably will see them again. Maybe in a different shaped craft. I really feel that they are my guardian angels. When I have troubles in my life and worries about things, I talk to them. And things seem to work themselves out. I really feel like it's maybe hard to describe, but it's a feeling. I feel safe. I feel very safe.
I want nothing to do with them. And personally, today I'm a born-again Christian. So today, if you were to ask me what I think they were or are, I think they're demonic. I really do. But, who's to say? I mean, the day will come that we'll all know.
And as soon as we have language, we all of a sudden have access to this vast repository of stories that humanity has created for us, before us. And we make use of those stories to structure our experience. When we're confronted with something mysterious, when we're confronted with something that we want or need to explain and don't know how to explain, we reach for those habitual stories to make sense of our experience.
Public knowledge about the sky is so low that almost anything in the sky can be misconstrued. People can't spot the brightest planets like Venus and Jupiter. People have no idea that the North Star isn't the brightest thing in the sky. This is simple astronomy. This is something that the ancients would have known, that every village idiot would have known 500 years ago, that one star is stationary and all the others go around it. What's more basic than that? I don't think one person in 50 knows that today. So of course, when people go out, when they see anything, it's not even necessarily anything unusual. I think when they see anything that they're noticing for the first time, they may be as apt to attribute something dramatic to it than something ordinary. And a lot of people like drama. I'm Bob Berman. I'm an astronomer. I was astronomy professor at Marymount College for years, author of a number of books. I tend to be a skeptic because in science, that's the way you get at the truth. If you believe everything everybody says, you're really not going to get anywhere because people are often wrong or they have motives.
All right, my name is Phil Kaseski, and 52 years old. They cloak their ships and fool us into thinking that they're just airplanes, or they can do this with a form of cloaking they call molecular plasma, which is generated by the core drive of the ship. It's a form of dark, cloudy plasma, and you will see this in the video that I've burned to DVD for you. You will see it's like dark clouds, and it starts billowing around the light of the ship and all kinds of it looks spooky. And anyway, so they cloak their ship with that, and they can cloak the light and arrange the lights to make it look like an airplane at night when it's really this bizarre bat wing shaped triangular craft. It looks like a creature. It's scary, actually. I've seen the ship when they've taken the cloak off for a few seconds, and it looks like a bat.
And I think when they look up in the sky, there's a tendency among some people to go for the dramatic rather than to seek a common or a cause. In science, we have something called Occam's razor. You know what that is. Occam's razor is that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. For example, if your car doesn't start in the morning, Occam's razor says that the first thing you should think is, well, maybe the battery died. Maybe I left a light on. Maybe it's out of fuel. You'd never first think, well, maybe a meteorite hit the car overnight and destroyed its electronic ignition system. It's possible, but that's not the simplest, most likely explanation. So Occam's razor says you start with the simplest explanation, then you go to the next simplest, and that's the way science works if you really want to find answers. But a lot of people don't do that. They'll start with the most unlikely thing. If they see a light in the sky, they'll say, aliens from another galaxy. Or worse, aliens from another galaxy trying to find me.
Well, she told me last year, she said, we do really not want to be known by vast numbers of Earth people due to their destructive nature. She told me there are a lot of Earth people that are ready and they will awaken, but she also told me there's many, many Earth people that won't, and they don't deserve to know them. And I was chosen and selected to make their presence known and to back it up with videos. And I do have videos that show some very unusual things.
When we encode an event in memory, we don't encode it photographically as just a series of sensory impressions. So if we witness a car crash, for example, we don't say, well, I saw an area of white moving at this speed and an area of red moving at this speed, and then when they came together there was a loud sound. We don't think in terms of pure sensory impressions. We encode our impressions according to meaningful interpretations. So we say, there was a white car and it collided with a red car. Or even, oh my gosh, I just saw a car crash. And that is helpful for us. I mean, those kinds of meaningful organizations of our sensory impressions are what allow us to use our memories as guides to action and to communicate those memories effectively to other people.
My name is Scott Dalala. And I'm Art Dalala.
All right, you're his dad?
Yes, I am.
And I understand you both had a sighting here.
Yeah, it was like late summer 1986, and it was just
minutes before it was going to get completely dark. And all of a sudden, my sister comes flying into the driveway just yelling something. And I'm like, what is she yelling? And she's like, look up into the sky. And I come out and go, what? She's like, look over there. And I was like,
and there it was.
I look up and it was amazing. We were seeing a UFO.
And so part of that process of arranging sensory impressions into meaningful wholes is that we use all of the information that's available to us to figure out how to do that. So our memories they're not perfect snapshots of what we saw. They're not intended to be. That wouldn't be as useful to us. They're guides to action. They're meant to be meaningful wholes. And so consequently, they function better as meaningful arrangements of information than they do as photographic impressions.
It was long. It was about tree level, coming from the south, heading north. It was quiet, moving very slow. And the one we saw had lights sort of in a circular...
Well, like a cluster of...
Cluster of lights, looked like a circle.
And one at the end.
And one at the way end, so it looked like it could be the size of a football field or 2 football fields.
And it was a solid object?
I believe so. Well, again, it was dark and it was floating, actually. A floating motion.
Yeah.
Now, what Scott didn't see or doesn't remember, but I do, is that it stopped around that pine tree area, between the pine tree and the lake, let's say, and it stopped dead. No sound. It was quivering though, it was like sort of shaking slightly when it was stationary.
And imperceptible eye muscle movements often make objects seem to move. For example, when we look at Earth satellites in the night sky, they'll never appear to move in a laser straight line, even though they're moving in a straight line. They'll always seem to zigzag, and that's because of imperceptible eye muscle movements that produce this illusion. I see it myself, and even though I know that it's an illusion, I still see it.
We interviewed several people whose parents also had sightings, and we wondered, is it because they expected to have a sighting? Is it like a rite of passage in that family? Or is there something more to this intergenerational pattern of sightings?
Well, thank you both for being here. This is a rare opportunity to have a mother-daughter. If you could just state your names and then tell your stories.
Christine Leonard.
And I'm Carol Hughes DeMarco.
And who wants to start with their sighting? Do you want to go first, since yours was the earliest?
I'll start. My first sighting, I was probably about 14, which was around 1960, I believe. 14, 15 years old. I was living in the Bronx at the time, and we lived in a 5-story walk-up apartment, and we spent a lot of time on the roof, like they called it Tar Beach at that time. And I probably was taking a line of clothes down for my mom. It was dusk, and I spotted a metallic object with windows all around, and what drew my attention to it was it was almost like there was a beacon inside the windows that kept rotating so that you would see the lights circulating inside this object that was disc-shaped on the top and on the bottom. It was a silver metallic object. It just hovered over this Parkchester area of the Bronx, and I watched, and I wanted to run down and get a pair of binoculars so I could get a closer view of this thing, because it just took me by such surprise. But I was afraid I'd miss it, and it would scoot away, and sure enough, within a few minutes, it just scooted off and disappeared. It was not a plane, it was not a helicopter, it moved much too quickly. And the next sighting I had was, as a resident of Putnam Valley later on in life, the V-shaped formations that were passing over the Hudson Valley at that time in the 1980s. I could see them clearly. I saw them several times. They were not ultralights. You could not see through the V. They were solid on clear nights. You could actually see that it was a solid object with lights all around it. There weren't many lights, but enough to indicate that it was a V-shaped object. And they also were silent, never heard any noise. They were close enough that you would have heard even an ultralight engine and overhead. And they were huge. They were the size of Shea Stadium when they did fly over. That's about it.
Could you just speak to how has that influenced your life at all?
Well, I'm a believer. After seeing both of them, they were very different. The two objects I saw, from one as a young teenager and one as an adult. But I certainly believe that there is another form of life, that why they're not contacting us is beyond me, but I certainly believe I could say that much. I'm very open to anything else I might see. I can't say.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Christine.
Okay, well, my story is I was right here at this beach, and it was summer of 1980, probably July, and it was also dusk. I was down here with two of my girlfriends and I, and we were on this dock right here, and all the way at the north end over the mountain we saw 3 red lights coming this way, and we couldn't figure out what it was. So I had a rubber boat here, and one of my girlfriends and I got in the boat to get a closer look, and we went right about where that little silver boat is right there. And as it started coming closer, we can tell that it was a big object, that we were getting scared. So we came in as quick as we can, and by that time it started, 2 of the lights took off from the one light. There was 3 altogether, and 2 of them darted out away from each other, and then red and green lights started encircling around and blinking, and all of a sudden just turned into this big craft, which was right over this beach over here in between the water, and it was as high as the tallest tree right in front of us. And it hovered with no sound also for about, I'd say maybe a minute or so, and these big white lights lit up as it slowly started to turn all around the outside of the craft. They lit up so bright that it lit up one of the summer bungalows that was on the lake over there, that we can see the picture frame on a picture hanging in the wall. And then it just slowly started drifting away. We couldn't actually see in the windows, but it was so bright we can see through the windows. And because it was so high up, if it was down a little low, we could probably see inside the craft, but it wasn't that low. And then it just slowly hovered over the beach over here, and without a sound just disappeared right in front of our eyes. And that was about it.
So how did your sighting affect your life?
Just wanted to do research, you know, about other people seeing sightings, and if anybody else saw what we saw that night, because nobody seemed to ever believe me.
Well, hopefully your mom believed you.
I did.
Yes, she believed me.
I never doubted it.
Now, you were how old when this happened?
I was 14.
And you were about?
I was about the same age, yes. Okay. If I remember correctly, I know I was about 14 or 15 at the time.
And you have 3 daughters who are waiting to have their sightings?
Yes. My oldest daughter is 17. My middle daughter, she'll be 16 soon. And my youngest is 11, so.
And they're looking forward.
They are looking forward. They are looking and trying to find one, but it's not so easy.
Nothing yet. Okay, well, I really appreciate you sharing your stories. Again, it really adds something, having a mother and daughter 20 years apart, almost seeing the same exact craft, possibly seeing the same exact craft.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I hear the phrase rite of passage, I think about a passage between things. Very often, rites of passage mark a transition between childhood and adulthood, or between partial and full membership in a community. And so when I hear about UFO sightings being called a rite of passage for families, I wonder what they mark the transition between. I wonder if for these families it marks a transition between childhood and full adult membership in a community or in the family. And if that's the case, I wonder what it's like for people who don't have a sighting, for people who don't see things in that way, or who don't have that experience. I wonder if it's difficult for them to feel like they belong.
Well, I think people should be made aware of what's going on. You know, that's all I have to say about that.
Could you?
I don't know. I feel like I'm on the spot here now on the camera, but
how would you describe yourself? What kind of a person are you?
level-headed, honest, hardworking, family man.
How old were you when you think you had your first experience?
Before school, I think, like maybe 4 or 5. I'm not really sure how old I was. So I have some real early memories of seeing a craft sitting up over the mountain by our house.
Okay. Did you understand what was happening at the time?
No. No, I didn't. I remember seeing this object sitting up over Trap Rock. I knew it didn't belong there as a child, and it was in broad daylight. And, you know, I don't know if it was morning or afternoon, but it was, you know, plain to see. And I think I saw it several times there.
For the record, you are the mother of the man I interviewed on May 10th?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me when you moved into this house near Trap Rock where these experiences took place?
Exactly.
Okay.
We moved in 1950 on June 14th.
You do know exactly. Okay. And how old was your son at that point?
5 months.
5 months. Okay. Do you recall your son telling you about any of these experiences?
Oh, yes. He told me many times that it was all lit up on the outside of his. He had a lot of windows. We had a sun porch that we converted into a bedroom for my son. And he told me that somebody was in his room at night. And I would tell my husband, and he didn't want us to be frightened, and he'd say, oh, well, there's a street light right over the garage that probably is shining in Gary, but these lights were too bright. They wasn't a street light.
Okay. When was the first time anything happened to you? Do you recall anything as a child happening, or was it just when you moved into that house near Trap Rock?
When I was growing up on 3rd Street in Haverstraw, it was so hot one night that I was leaning on the windowsill at the window to see if there was a breeze, and I saw the 2 of them right down in the backyard. And that's the first time that I saw them.
Right. Do you know about what year
I
that
told
was?
my dad, and I was about, I guess, 8 years old, and my dad said, oh, I think you were just imagining this. There was no one out there. And I didn't think any more about it, but it never happened again until I got married and moved on the old Haverstraw Road.
Many skeptics claim that these UFO sightings were nothing more than a formation of ultralights.
It was the ultralights. We could hear the engines, and the closer we got, we could see them individual, but they were definitely that V formation, and they just kept moving. They did not hover, and they were very noisy.
After this happened, I mean, you heard so many stories. Oh, they're V-shaped. They're airplanes that are flying from whatever airport, and they fly in a V form. And what I saw was not a plane.
It was in the paper, Kingston Freeman, I don't know what else, but I do know that everyone that talked about this spoke about how silent it was, how it just held still or just disappeared quickly. And at the bottom of the article, as is typical, they said that the authorities said that it was ultralights. You know, flight information, of course, that was what they say, just like swamp gas.
So in August, we visited Joe Acavino at the Hudson Valley Airport in Bloomingburg, New York.
My name's Joe Acavino, and I've been flying for about 32 years. Started back in the early 70s, really got heavy in the 80s. Got involved with the hang gliding out of Ellenville, New York, and then they got into ultralights. Start off with flying at night it's not allowed, it's illegal, but with ultralights you're allowed to fly a half hour after sunset. That's legal sunset with a strobe light. So perhaps some people could pick up this strobe light right after sunset. Now also, as far as flying in formation, you can fly in formation if you've been properly trained to do that. It's also a little bit of teamwork, obviously, and it requires communication between the 3 or 4 planes that are flying in this formation. And we've done it, but we've done it in a safe manner. We planned ahead during daylight hours and during proper weather conditions to do this.
How close can you safely get to one another?
Close, we're talking about 30 feet apart.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to get too much closer in the wingspan. In the sky, you feel fairly close when you're flying that close, but looking up at those planes flying in formation, it gets the appearance as though they're closer. Every plane, every ultralight or sport plane has its stall characteristics. Mine happens to be at 22. So I can fly it at 22, but keeping in mind that's the airspeed, not the ground speed. So if I'm flying in a wind that is 10 miles an hour over the ground, it actually on the ground looks like I'm going even slower.
I see. So you subtract the airspeed and it would look 12 miles an hour.
Correct. And there's been times when someone would be, say, with me, a student, in the wind up there at 2,000 feet is at 20 miles an hour and we're going 30. And I'll say, slow down to 22, indicated airspeed. Now you can picture this, looking off to the right or the left and seeing a road down there with people getting on a school bus, and we're actually almost stopping, waiting for them to get on the school bus and then accelerate and move on to the next stop.
Okay.
This is understanding depth perception as well as airspeed and control. They're 2-cycle engines. Some of them are quieter because of the prop. If it's a wood prop, it's going to be louder than a composite prop, most people feel. I would compare it to some weed whackers.
Okay.
If that
I have to admit, I was a little apprehensive going up in the ultralight, but the second we left the ground, I was absolutely elated. I never felt so free in my life. Flying in an ultralight is the closest to, you know, that Superman flying on your own. I got such a rush out of it. I could see where people get addicted immediately.
it was just remarkable. It was so smooth. That was so exciting.
You got to see the horses?
Right? And the airport from up there. I'm on an adrenaline rush. I'm loving it.
After we came down, so to speak, we got down to the issue at hand. Was it possible that the lights people were seeing were actually formations of ultralights?
The biggest problem I have with that, first of all, is getting that many together at once. And secondly, they, as you now know, make quite a lot of noise. So if you're looking at something up there and you're not hearing anything, it can't be ultralights because they got engines. So, maybe gliders, but they look different. So I don't think they could be ultralights. And of course, if folks haven't seen one up close like you have today, they might say, well, it's an ultralight. But once you've seen it and heard it, you can more easily identify it.
Now they also said that they, not only ultralights, but they put Christmas lights around the wings to fly, for illumination.
Yeah, well, that's kind of hard to do because how do you attach them and control the power on them? So I've never heard of that, and never heard of anyone trying to do that. So it doesn't sound like an ultralight to me. But we got a nice day for flying today, though.
Our conclusion? We don't think so.
I also am wary of people seeking publicity, just like those pilots in Stormville. I know you've heard of them years ago that love to fly at night in formation so that they could read about the UFOs that were spotted in the paper. The Kingston Freeman and some other, the Poughkeepsie Journal used to report on the UFO reports. These people love that. So I don't know, once you eliminate the hoaxes and the pranks and the misidentifications with military aircraft and the mentally ill people, I don't know how much you have left that are genuine, that you really have to explain.
We're at an undisclosed location overlooking some of the Pine Bush UFO hotspots here tonight, and we have no idea what we're going to see, but we're overlooking the Jewish cemetery area and the fields on either side, which have been known to have a lot of activity, so it's worth a shot. One of the people we interviewed had mentioned that the field to the north of the Jewish cemetery was one of the locations where he had the most activity. And a couple of other people we have interviewed have said the same thing. That seems to be one of the focuses for activity in this area.
Well, let's see. The most prevalent phenomena seen here have been obviously the flashing that I talked about before. Flashing, as I mentioned before, is really tough to critique. The two things that you have to rule out are fireworks, and you have to rule out distant thunderstorms. And you would be shocked how far away thunderstorms can be seen from this location. But a lot of the flashing phenomena has been directly over the heads of people. Apparently doesn't seem to be anything there, but something is casting a strobing, flashing light. And it could be just random flashes, or it could be a rhythmic flash. That was prevalent in the 80s and the 90s and faded away along with everything else around 97. So flashing is prevalent here. Orange globes, I've come upon a number of reports of globes wandering from this area, going across 52, going over Marshmallow Field.
I'm Jenny. This is my front lawn, actually.
I'm Nancy Scarpula, and I'm a friend of Jenny's.
And basically, we showed up tonight. We all gathered around to see, to just look at the skies, see what was going on. We had talked about different UFOs, different experiences, things that have happened in the past, history with the 80s and 90s.
Somebody who had probably the most recent sighting, Nancy, lives just a few minutes away from here. So these are the same skies in which she saw her UFO just the end of this August. Well, I'm just going to plant myself here. Cover up in a blanket. Did you bring a chair?
Yes, Jenny's got chairs.
It's like 4th of July fireworks here. And
that's all the way to
chairs. This isn't cheating using a blanket and a lounge chair. We've got the Pleiades out that direction. Which I have had several people tell me that the craft are from the Pleiades.
Oh yeah.
So.
You'll get any number of people who are absolutely certain exactly what and where they are.
Yes, a Pleiadian craft, and some say they're from Orion, and I have no comment.
No comment.
So we're only about 2 months removed from your last sighting. It's really tough then.
It was August.
Okay.
At the end of August when I saw it. Yes, exactly. 2 months.
We were out here for several hours. A lot of airplanes. A couple of one strange light in the woods. Could have been anything. We had a very interesting moment when a very low-flying airliner was illuminating the cloud deck, and it was something right out of a Hollywood movie, and for the briefest second, I was like, oh my God, this is it! What's your opinion on that? Do you think they don't care whether they're seen or not? They want to be seen?
I don't even know if there's a day.
You don't even know if there's
Maybe it's
a
an
day.
it. I, for one, have gotten very far away from the idea that there are little gray guys piloting these things. I think it's something completely different than that. Something very anomalous, but completely different.
What, like, if you had to, what would you describe it as?
I don't think I'm ready to at this point.
Okay.
I'm really kind of lost in the woods when it comes to that.
The blinking light behind this tree up in the air, by the way. I don't know if anyone else sees it.
Whoa, what is that?
Is that a plane flying
I think it's
overhead?
it's the FAA strobing in enough clouds. That'll freak you out if you don't know what you're
very
looking at.
impressive. That's low.
They come in from that way.
Nice. That was an impressive light display.
But again, you hear how loud that is.
Right.
And that's one of the hallmarks of the truly great anomalous sightings of this area, is just the total lack of sound.
And then we heard the jet engines, and the illusion was broken. But it doesn't dampen my spirit at all. It's someplace I definitely want to come back to. There are just too many compelling stories here, and I don't want to just hear it from other people. I want to see it for myself. So I will be back.
There's numerous stone sites. Animal effigies made extraordinarily well done. They're not just rocks piled up on top of each other random. These are very ancient stone sites that are huge all over the valleys here.
Throughout our research, we almost seemed to be coming up with more questions than answers. Undeterred, we grabbed our cameras and delved deep into the heart of the matter. Oh! I didn't think it was going to be that big. How do we get down there? So I'm excited to see these other chambers. I didn't know they existed before. And I have no idea why, but a lot of the strange activity in the area is associated with the chambers. People see lights inside of them. They see lights hovering around them. Some people report seeing different kinds of strange figures. And it has also been reported that UFO sightings are concentrated in locations where these chambers are. I have no explanation for that. All I know is some of the chambers have been situated on sites where there are magnetic anomalies, where the natural Earth magnetic field has some strange fluctuations. How the builders of these chambers knew about the magnetic anomalies at these places, I don't know. And again, I have no idea of the significance, who built them, when they were built, but it's undeniable that where there are a lot of UFO sightings, at least in Putnam County, chances are there's a chamber nearby. But this is the first double one I've seen. But you can see the size of the stone slabs is huge. We invited Scott to come on our little expedition to the stone chambers. We had recently interviewed him and found out that he had a great interest in these stone chambers and had never seen one before.
Right now while I'm dripping, wow, I'm sweating. It's damp, but it's exciting being up here. This is where it's at. I mean, it's just entering these woods automatically. I had the feeling of, or instantly I had the feeling of just, mystery and excitement. It's great. Oh, I can see it from here.
See?
It's like a cave.
Right? As I said, that's where I had my first glimpse. It was like a hole in the woods.
Whoa. That is nothing like I imagined it. Let's think crazy. Let's think outside the box. Why would they build it? Who would build it? Let's think extraordinary. Let's think aliens. Who would build it?
Well, it could be a temple or some sort of religious site, whoever was here.
This is amazing.
Here comes the rain, so
just in time
we might want to examine the interior. But see, look at the size of these slabs.
I gotta get my flashlights here.
Right?
Strike that.
And again, same construction, slanted in walls.
That is insane. How deep is it?
Look, yeah, that's just it. So all the way back here.
This is nuts.
This is why it's the King's Chamber. It's at least twice as large as any of the others.
Unbelievable. We should do an EVP session.
Yeah.
Let's see now, so you looked pretty carefully on this?
I didn't the last time I was here. I didn't have a flashlight. Wasn't thinking it was this big and deep.
So I'm gonna sweep this.
Yeah, we'll check the hole. Apparently,
so what's this right here? I don't know if it's, yeah.
Masonry into, well, you think someone carved, that looks kind of like a JL. Or just sheared here naturally.
I don't know. I wish we had an ancient linguist with us. But I think this really warrants a team of archaeologists doing some serious studies on these. And then we have these chambers here that have something to do, some sort of connection to UFO sightings. I don't know what it is. I don't pretend to know what the connection is, but a lot of unusual activity has been connected to the site of stone chambers. So the mystery deepens. As with a lot of projects, I have more questions than answers, more than I started out with. It really is, it's a quest now. I want to know. There's something from some other part of the universe, I believe, has been visiting us. One thing that certainly struck us, regardless of whether we could confirm or deny the existence of UFOs, is the community that develops around this subject. Some of the UFO hunters were very mysterious. Some were just like the people next door. Some were a little out there.
I went home and I was in meditation. And I was just trying to calm my mind and meditate. And all of a sudden I started getting some communication in my mind. It's called telepathy. And it was a female voice, and she was announcing herself to me, that her name. She told me that she was one of the pilots that I had seen, that fly these craft. She was one of the pilots. She told me her name was Abena. And she just told me she wanted me to know that they're here, they are extraterrestrials, and that they are originally from the constellation Orion. She told me that they have a very large underground base under Orange County. She told me the exact dimensions of it. I don't know if I should tell that, but...
Something kept telling me to go to the store. And it was, go to the store and get some more beer. Because I had a few cans of beer in the refrigerator. I didn't really need to go, but at some point I went. And I would say it was about 10 o'clock. And there was a country store a few miles down the road that closed at midnight. And so I went out and got in my car and I drove down this back road, and as I turned onto this road, I saw this light up over the field. I just remember sitting there and looking at this thing, and I remember feeling all the hair on my head and my body stand up.
She told me they have huge mineral extractors under there, and they're using these minerals for their alloys in their spacecraft and certain of their technologies and things. And she also told me that this base under Orange County has been here since the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Next thing I remember is seeing it disappear. Now, it seemed to raise off the ground a bit, and then it was gone in an instant. I don't know if it just flew away that fast or it just disappeared, but it was gone. And I started my car up and I drove onto the store. When I got to the store, they were closing. And so it was around midnight. Anyway, I went on home and my wife was hysterical. As soon as I walked in, she said, "Oh my God, where have you been?" And I said, "I haven't been anywhere. I just went to the store and came back." And she said, "No, you've been gone for 2 hours."
Implicitly, she told me that they're here to keep an eye on us because there's bad alien races that are trying to take over the Earth, and they want to they don't like Earth, the Earth-human species. And a lot of the bad things that happen, a lot of the missing children that go missing and things like that is due to these bad aliens of the reptilian species. And they have constant wars with these other races. And so I want to make it also, she made it very clear to me that this Orion race here under New York is a military operation. They are of an extraterrestrial military. So they are patrolling, they have direct orders to patrol this area of our galaxy.
Does our government know about this?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember, I don't know if it was the next day, I was working on my wife's car in the driveway, and I had pulled my car up next to it because I had to jump it, and I had to squeeze between the two cars at one point. I parked them very close, and as I did, my thigh hurt. And so I went into the bathroom, and it really hurt, like I did something to it, but there, you know, my pants weren't ripped or anything. So and I went in, I pulled my pants on, and I had this scoop mark on my thigh. A piece of skin had been taken out of it. And you can actually put your finger in it, you know, like it was scooped out. But it was also cauterized, no blood. No blood or anything, just a little pain that alerted me to it when I rubbed it up against the car. And I'm shaking inside right now, and I became very ill after that. I don't think I finished working on the car. I felt like suddenly I had the flu.
She did a scan on my bloodline. This was decades ago, but she found out that, she said, you have, on your paternal side, you have one of our ancestors mated with one of your father's ancestors. And so there was intermarriage between our races anciently, a long time ago in Europe.
Another night, it might have been the next night, that night, when I woke up in the morning, my wife woke up and looked over at me. She said, oh my God, I must have hit you in the face during the night, because I had blood caked all over my face coming out of my nose. It was all over my mouth and chin, and my head hurt right up over my nose and my forehead, between my eyes. I went down and took a shower and washed the blood off me. I couldn't figure out what the heck happened. I thought, you know. And I became very sick after that.
A lot of people who have had some sort of contact claim to have some sort of implants. Do you think you have any?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
I don't think I do.
Okay. Have you made any physical contact with them?
Yes.
Okay. Do you care to speak about that?
Yep. She revealed herself to me right here in Pine Bush on the street. She showed me herself physically. So I got a good look at what she looked like. There was no words really spoken. She just wanted me to see who she was, what she looked like. And she had blonde hair, long blonde hair, very oval, cat-like eyes, tall, beautiful, and very Swedish or European looking, very high cheekbones, very exotic looking.
Okay. Was she dressed in our type of clothing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she was just mingling.
Yep.
Oh my God, again, look at that. Wow. Thank you, my friends from Orion, again for this most beautiful sighting of your plasma-based lights. Awesome. Look at that. That's, if you can't tell, that's extraterrestrial. Oh my God. Look at that. Oh my. Oh my God. Look at that.
Oh my God. Holy smokes. This is alien. Look at that. This is out of this world, my friend. Oh my God. Look at that optical play with that light. Unbelievable. If this doesn't convince you people that, oh my, it has to convince you that what I'm filming here is extraterrestrial all the way, 100%. She revealed to me that their core drives in their ships are run on plasma. And when they are filled with the small amount of plasma, the ship, she told me, can run for 45 years without refilling it. 45 of their years, which amounts to a lot more than our years. But she told me that it's a tachyon-based drive, which is a faster than light particle. And I do have video of her ship.
I was there about 4 years. And my wife was trying to have a baby at the time. Because this had happened several times where she was pregnant and then she wasn't. And I came home from work and we were sure, you know, about it. And I came in, she was sitting on the steps crying. And I said, what's the matter? She said, the baby's gone. I remember those words because it seemed kind of odd to me at the time too. And she said, I'm not pregnant anymore. It's gone.
So clearly, you know, this is a story. This is quite a story. Yes. And, you know, I'm having trouble with it, but what would you tell people who do doubt?
In fact, I burned some of my video to a DVD so you can look at it, the evidence that I've gotten. Okay. And if you pay attention to some of the, a few of the sightings I had when I'm talking to the craft, as I'm talking to it, the craft responds by intensifying its light and then dimming it and then going away and then coming back a second time. And I think this offers some pretty concrete evidence and proof that the craft is hearing me telepathically and that I am in contact with it. And that should serve as some evidence for some people. It might help them, you know, put things together and see that there's something unusual going on. And these craft come around and they just let me film them for extended time, you know, extended periods. Okay. That would help. And, you know, I don't blame anybody, you know, for not, because you can't, there's no way of verifying it outside of the fact that of showing you that I do have a little bit of evidence that I think corroborates what I'm telling you, that that she had contacted me. Adana, thank you. Thank you, girl.
This is Monday, July 9th, about 10:30 in the morning, and I'm on my way to the Goshen Diner to meet with our mystery caller, as we have labeled him since we are not using his name. I don't really understand why I need to see him today. We were scheduled for an interview on Wednesday the 11th, but he said he has to talk to me first. So must be important. I'm very curious as to what he's going to reveal to me. More on that later.
As a psychologist, I think one of the most difficult tasks that we are faced with in some ways is making that distinction between somebody who has experienced something traumatic and somebody who has an underlying psychological thing going on that leads them to either imagine traumatic experiences or more often experience events as traumatic that other people might not experience in that way.
Okay, just got back from my meeting with the mystery caller, and I have to admit I'm pretty weirded out. If even a fraction of what he's saying is true, we are living in very strange times. The purpose of this meeting was to talk a little bit about what we will and will not discuss during the formal interview in a couple of days, and to also protect some of the other people we're going to interview. He genuinely believes he's being harassed by certain elements of the government for his outspoken beliefs on UFOs and alien contact and all of that. And he wants to avoid this situation with other people we're interviewing.
The day we had scheduled to interview him, he was late, about 30 minutes, and we were just about to give up when he arrived. And it turned out he had actually planned it that way because he had also called my home phone and left a message that he was not going to be able to make it to the interview. So by coming late and leaving this message, he hoped that if anyone was listening in, they would not follow us to this interview.
If you have that ET connection, it'll always be with you. You can deny it all you want, or you can accept it all you want, or you could just do what I did, try to live your life and just deal with it as it comes. And I still have these contacts today, and I just want to say they are for real. It's not a dream. Sometimes I wish it were a dream, but on the other hand, I have learned a lot from it. What I have learned, I don't know. I mean, I can't sum it up, but I've learned, evidently I've had many learning experiences.
So where do you see all this leading?
I think we'll come to a head by 2013. Everything will be out, it'll be known. Whether the government and those in control disclose that the existence of UFOs and ETs, that is to be seen, but the people themselves will find out either on a one-to-one basis or in several groups or in several areas, and it will not be by faked, planned, staged things, it will be by the real thing.
Have there been any repercussions?
I've had trouble getting work.
Can you elaborate on how it's keeping you from getting a job?
Evidently, I'm on the Homeland Security list or somehow on there. And when people do background checks, I don't get hired, and it's not because of my lack of skills, lack of experience, or lack of education. I've been told that. So it's just that they get scared when they see that I have been on the list or I've done these things.
Okay, and you have no criminal background?
I have no criminal background, no, not so whatsoever. Unless contact with ETs and seeing UFOs is a crime, at this point I don't know why or if it is, but it's not, I have no control over it. And they are, yes, they are still in contact with me, and I'm getting messages, still getting messages, and at this point I have not published anymore. And all I can say is I know these things affect people's lifestyle. I didn't expect it to start hitting my career and me having trouble getting a job. I don't live in fear. Not fear of them, but and I'm not really now, I'm not afraid of the government and Homeland Security people anymore. I'm not afraid of them either, because I know the real situation.
It was a mindful, to say the least. My mind was really spinning afterwards. If even a fraction of what he was saying was true, then this was a lot bigger than I had ever imagined. And if it wasn't true, then I just didn't know how to handle it in the context of all the other interviews.
What would you say to people, like if you tell them the story and they gave you you're nuts, or they don't believe you? How does that make you feel, like, you know, you're being judged and stuff like that?
For me, it's okay. I mean, it's something that it's extraordinary. I don't expect people to believe me, you know, and if they saw it though, they would have a different opinion. You know, it was that incredible, where they might not think it's aliens, but it's just something that is strange, and it's unexplainable. And people who live in the Hudson Valley, there's something going on in the Hudson Valley, you know, something extraordinary. And people who live around here are lucky to be here, to have a chance to really explore it, and I wouldn't miss it, you know, if I was them. It's great. And I think it's harder for people to notice it today because everyone's on their text, computers. Back then it was like, you just kind of look up, you know, you're not really texting your friend. You know, so just, I would tell people to look up and text less, and you might see something.
I can't begin to pretend I know why there are UFO sightings in the Hudson Valley, and so many of them. Perhaps it's the geography, maybe it's just a very populated area, maybe it goes back to something long before people were even here. I don't know, but it's undeniable, and I, for one, would like to know the answer. A lot of research projects are very dry. This was not a dry project whatsoever. It was exciting, exhilarating, mysterious, sometimes exhausting, but there was always that goal that we didn't know what we were quite reaching for, and I don't know that we attained it, but we got to meet so many fantastic people, hear these incredible stories spanning generations. I got to fly in an ultralight, for God's sake. I mean, who gets to do that? We crawling around ancient stone chambers. The project took on a life of its own, and we just went whichever direction it took us. And in the end, it's a big picture that's hard to grasp, but a story that absolutely needs to be told. There are so many sightings over so many years by so many credible people. Why isn't somebody paying more attention to this? By the time the project was about 3/4 done, I realized the overwhelming emotion I had was actually anger, not something I had expected. I'm angry the way witnesses have been treated and ridiculed. I'm angry the way they've been ignored. I'm angry that the government, that officials, they're not paying any attention to this. How can you not pay attention to things that are violating our airspace with impunity, that are scaring our citizens? How do you ignore that and laugh it off as if they're all a bunch of crazy people? I'm angry. After all of the evidence we've gathered, I am 100% convinced that something extraterrestrial has been over the skies of the Hudson Valley.